You're going to introduce the panelists, right? Okay. We're going to transition from our press conference into BWB Los Angeles. It's a really exciting opportunity for us to have worked with Blogs with Balls now for a bunch of times. I know the first time I was invited to be a part of it, and the Players Association was invited to be a part of it, was the one we had in New York City at the Bloomberg offices. From that point on, I really understood the power and the ability of us to reach out directly to not only sports fans, but people that are writing about it in a way that is a little more non-traditional, if you will. And it's given me an opportunity to meet some fantastic people and engage with outlets that I normally would not have had the opportunity to do so. And I know, Don Povey and I have spoken a lot about our mutual interests. Today we're excited to have a bunch of really interesting panels and panelists. And to do it in Los Angeles, a place that we haven't done anything really with, and a place that BWB hasn't done much with. So with that, I want to introduce my good friend and the head of, or chair of BWB. I don't even know if you have a title for it. Titles, right? Take it from somebody that has the longest one in the history of the world. Don Povey, thank you.
Thanks, George. As George says, we've had a really nice working experience with the NFL Players Association and George specifically and his team. And it's really a pleasure to be here and be a part of this event. As he said, the way that the Players Association has embraced new media, our organization, and really made inroads at our events with online influencers, if you will, has been refreshing. It's really been a great relationship, and we're proud to be here. So with that said, we're going to bring up our first panel about the state of, I guess you would say, the BCS bowl system, postseason games like this. Kyle Bunch, my partner, is going to moderate this panel, and they can introduce themselves. We are live streaming. Come on in, sit down, and listen to the panel. Certainly participate. We're going to ask it when you do ask a question that the panelist or the moderator repeats it so we could hear it on the stream. But without further ado, let me introduce Kyle.
You guys all want to come on up and just do it all at once.
I'll go ahead and take this lovely standing podium. So thank you. Like Don said, thanks everybody for coming out. We're going to get things started today by talking about hopefully not an enormously controversial topic, which is all the ways that we would love to see postseason college football improve. I think we're coming off of a particularly rough bowl season with not nearly as much in the way of... Oh, you can't hear? Oh, here, I will make this louder. So we're going to talk about, college football postseason, ways that we can improve, or we would like to see improvements, and kind of what those shortcomings in the current system are costing players, schools, to line the pockets of a few. So with all that intro being said, I'm going to go down the line here and just ask all of our panelists to introduce themselves, talk a little bit about their background, and then we'll dive right in. Down to the end, and Keith.
Keith Rivers, I finished last season playing with the Giants, went to USC for 4 years, played in 3 Rose Bowls and the Orange Bowl, and here to talk about bowls.
I'm Jason Kirk. I'm the college football editor at SB Nation. We have the possibly the world's worst ever college football show on YouTube called Shutdown Fullback.
I'm Erik Malinowski. I'm the night editor of Deadspin. I had absolutely nothing to do with the Manti Te'o story, so I don't know how much I can help. I attended Boston University, which does not have a college football team, so I'm not really sure why I'm on this panel, but I'll try to justify that by the end.
Hi, I'm Ryan Riddle. I went to the University of California, drafted by the Oakland Raiders, played in the NFL for a few years, and now featured columnist for Bleacher Report.
Larry Brown, went to UCLA. I have my own site, LarryBrownSports.com. Also have a background in sports radio as well.
All right, thanks everybody. And as Don said in the intro, I am Kyle Bunch. I am one of the co-founders of Blogs with Balls. I actually went to USC, so Keith, we've got numbers up here. And yeah, exactly. We'll wait until the end. Sneak up on him.
I'll get Heinz Ward out here.
Ooh. And yes, I run a site called Trojan Wire, a USC football blog, and also work for a digital agency called RGA, where we work on digital strategies for brands like Nike and MasterCard and other big sports marketers. So happy to be here. And like I said, wanted to talk about this topic that frequently will incite some rants, and figured that it was something good to cover here, have an open discussion about the bowl system. And lo and behold, after proposing the topic about a month and a half ago, I dove in to do some research in the days leading up to the panel and found that there was quite a bit of data to support the notion that we have a really broken system. I know, shock to probably most of the people in this audience, but said that bowl ratings, TV ratings are down 37% since 1998. This was, I think, this year in particular was maybe 15 or 20 year low for bowl TV ratings. Bowl attendance, physical attendance at the games, averaged 51,000, which is the lowest level since 1979. And I'm sure those of you who watched what was a pretty great college football season, then followed by a lot of really bad games, understand why I think a lot of us from a fan perspective are pretty frustrated. There's a lot of really great games, really great storylines throughout the year. We get to the postseason, we get this parade of just subpar games. So I think just to kind of start things out, I wanted to kind of go down the line and just talk a little bit with everybody here about this sort of broken system, what they see, as sort of some of the biggest flaws or areas that they'd like to see improved, from I think first and foremost from the fan perspective. So going down the line as college football fans, first and foremost, what would you like to see in terms of a better system? Just go ahead and start with Keith down on the end.
I'm not really sure, exactly how a playoff system would work or whatnot, and how it would work with finals for the kids, and kids getting to go home and see their families, because obviously we're gone the majority of the year. We don't get very many breaks like the rest of the student's body does. But I guess, obviously like everybody else, you would like to see some sort of a playoff system. Other than that, I'm not so sure. And the SEC, I would like to see them have less of a power ranking in the BCS, the numbers ranking, how they do it. They get put in these games all the time. They lose more games than other teams, and they're still number 1, number 2, number 3. So
I would say introducing the playoff is going to be a big change, and it's going to sort of affect what we think of as those lower tier worthless bowl games. But a word in defense of those games, people still do watch them. People still eat up any football. That Toledo, Arizona, New Mexico Bowl, it was like a December 15th bowl game, and I believe it still had higher ratings than Indiana Butler, which was a dramatic #1 college basketball game. There's still a market for these games. It's going to get better as we see, the playoff come in, and maybe some new rules come in that sort of do away with those 6-6 teams making bowl games. We're going to see better games, and therefore a better product overall for everyone. But that's my one little word in defense of those admittedly often crappy bowl games.
I'll go a little bit more in defense of the BCS in theory. I think that from a fan perspective, what I find so frustrating about the BCS is that in theory, it seems like such a great idea. It seems like such a natural evolution of what sports has been doing for the last 10, 15 years. Being able to bring computers into it and being able to, in theory, more objectively define who are the best teams in the country. Having said that, there are so many problems with it. You've got computer rankings. You've got Jeff Sagarin, for all that he's done for computer rankings. He programs in a code that was developed in the 1950s by IBM engineers. And is that really the kind of system at its root that we want determining who plays in the most important games in the season? I think that it's really easy to fix it with a playoff system. I think that the only question really is sort of how far do we want to go with it? Some people will say that 4 is enough, but I would probably say 8 at least. But that's where I stand.
Yeah, I think there's a pretty good consensus that we're all in favor of a playoff system of some sort. I agree with Keith that it's really hard to figure out a way that works for everyone, all parties. One of the downsides I could see coming up is if you have more than eight teams, 16 teams, that's 4 games added on to an already rather lengthy season for college players. You know, if they play a conference championship, you're looking at, 16 games in a college season, and that could be an issue. But then there's the question of upholding the tradition of bowl games, and frankly, these things can coexist. You can have playoff games that actually are titled as bowl games. So, and the teams that aren't actually in the playoff system, they can play their normal traditional bowl games, and it seems like the system can coexist, but the details and how to implement this, it's a big change, and people don't like to mess with tradition, even though it seems to be archaic. But
Ryan talked about tradition, and I actually like the bowl system as a whole. I like bowls. I grew up loving watching bowl games around New Year's, around that time, and we're sports fans. For me, that's how it is, and so I like the bowls, but I think there's a lot of modification that's needed, and I think that the two can go together. The problem that I see is that there's just oversaturation. There's just too much. We don't need as many bowl games as there are. I'm not sure what the exact number is, but it's well over 30 bowl games, and there are teams that don't deserve to be playing in postseason bowl games that are making it. Teams that finish below 500 have no business playing in the postseason. They shouldn't be rewarded with that. But a team that went 8-3 or maybe 9-2, those teams definitely, they should be playing in bowl games, and I like that system. And I really do think that what they have planned to switch to, which is the 14 playoff or the +1, to me, that's all that's needed. I think you could go down the list in several past years, and outside of maybe 4 teams, most teams don't deserve to be playing for a national championship. And you could look at this year, for example. I mean, teams like Kansas State that finish up there, a team like Oklahoma, we saw in the bowl games that they did not belong as a contender in the national championship race. I think you can count on your hand the amount of teams that really are national championship contenders. All you need is to play between 4 teams, and that's it, and have the other maybe top 30 teams in the country or so play bowl games, and to me, that would be a good solution.
Yeah, no, and I think that brings up a good point, which is there's sort of 2 key elements to this sort of postseason discussion. There's the top and the kind of system that we know is evolving, this BCS moving to a playoff. And I think, you go through the last few years, we all love to kind of bemoan the BCS, but typically it does a decent job, right? Like, I mean, there haven't been that many times where you had a national championship game where you were like, the computers really screwed us here. Or there's going to be times where there's 3 people who maybe have a claim to be in that game, and only 2 of them can go. But that, there's always going to be there. That can happen with a 4-team playoff and a 5th team that gets left out. A lot of as I started looking at this topic more, those middle tier games, that full month of now basically full month of football. There just seems like so many games that don't need to happen. To Larry's point of teams that are 6-6 that are now playing a postseason game. Something that we talked about before we came up here. Why do we even? I mean, if these guys aren't really playing for anything but a trophy full of potatoes or whatever it might be at whatever the Belk Bowl and some casual wear, Southern wear. Why do we even care why don't we just set up games we want to see? I mean, do you guys like? I feel like 6-6. We set these arbitrary marks that year to year may not matter. What would happen if we were to just have matchups that people really wanted to see be the focus, and not so much hitting some threshold for barely better than mediocre?
Yeah, as it is, every bowl has so many tie-ins with, two conferences, sometimes more than two conferences. Sometimes they have fallback conferences, and sometimes they have specific deals with independents. So we do get stuck with these when the math breaks down a certain way, or when certain teams in the ACC or the Big Ten lately are on probation, and we end up with worse teams going to bowl games. We get stuck with that kind of thing. So there is talk of sort of opening up the market a little bit and making it so that, we can just see interesting matchups without really having to worry about this is the 5th best team from the ACC, filling out a postseason via a spreadsheet. That would be a step in the right direction. I don't know how in the world you do that, who you even talk to convince to make that happen, but that would go a long way towards improving a lot of things.
And I'm curious also from the player perspective. I mean, Keith, you were kind of in a favorable spot to play in a lot of very important postseason games, but how much does that impact as USC fans watching those guys play in a Sun Bowl in El Paso and probably not seeming super up for that game? I mean, wouldn't that help a lot if you were just to play matchups against other interesting teams versus, oh, hey, these guys were 4th place in their conference just like us?
Yeah, I think it would be great if it was just great matchups. But at the end of the day, I think somebody touched on, people like football, and that's a few weeks without football, people go crazy on Saturdays, and you only have it on Sundays. So, people want to see football games, whether it's Butler, whatever team it is. Yeah. People want to see it. But, no, me personally speaking, I would have liked to see somebody else play in that game more deserving to play in the whatever bowl it was. No offense to the bowl, but, it's, the 6 and 16, they didn't deserve to play in the bowl. So
yeah, USC has already offended El Paso enough over the course of that bowl. We probably should watch what we said. But yes, understood. And I guess the flip side to what I'm arguing for, again, as a fan of a big conference major team, is that if we don't have some of this, then a lot of those mid-major conferences would only struggle that much more to get the money, to get the attention. So I understand that there's a system in place. It just seems like, from a fan perspective, like it's not rewarding us as much as it could. And maybe that's just the selfish kind of POV. But you also hear a lot about how much people who organize bowls make for just a few days worth of work. It sort of seems like a system that rewards a disproportionately small number of people, but that yet we can't fix, and that ESPN makes a lot of money from. So even if they might be able to make some more money from it, hey, ultimately people love football. They'll be able to sell ads against it regardless of who they have on that game. So, I mean, are we just stuck? Do you guys think that what's coming with the obvious? I mean, I'm shocked that we actually got a playoff. I really thought that was going to be something that was going to be more like, I tell my grandkids that there was once a day without a bowl game, but not like my daughter would actually not have to live through seeing lots of no college football playoff. Will it continue to evolve, or is this going to be another 15 to 20 year cycle where this change gets implemented and then that's how it works?
It could be a little bit of both. I mean, the postseason is going to be whatever the Big Ten, the SEC, and ESPN want it to be, because those three are the closest thing we have to a commissioner, that weird triumvirate. Everybody's going to go along with whatever they want. It could take 15 or 20 years for it to evolve beyond a 4-team thing for there to be a solution for the lower tier bowls. But, I think we look at the current plan, which is to have, the 2 semifinal bowls and then the 4 other BCS 2.0 bowls that are sort of bolted onto this weird New Year's Day-ish thing. I think we see the seeds of a 10-team playoff, a 12-team playoff right there. I think evolution, I think we can see that the next step is sort of already accounted for, and I don't think it's, I don't think it's all that hard to guess what's coming next. It's just an expanded playoff because money.
I almost feel like the best thing that we can hope for at this point is something a little bit more similar to the way that the NCAA does it with March Madness. I mean, you could debate the silliness of continuing to expand the tournament, going to 68 teams and all that. But for all of that, I mean, it is a committee. It is people in a room. I mean, I know they've been a lot more transparent over the last few years. And, I mean, I feel like there's a lot of misconceptions about the BCS. The BCS is not some, multinational global, evil conglomerate. It is a room in the back of Bill Hancock's house in suburban Kansas City. I mean, that's it. That's the BCS. And he has 2 part-time office assistants. I mean, it's not like any more conspiratorial than that. So I feel like, but this is the entity that is responsible for, all of our woes. So I feel like if they could eventually in time not only move to a playoff, but also move to something that is just a little bit more in vein with the way that they do March Madness, at least, procedure-wise, I feel like that would benefit the whole process so much more.
I definitely think that we're moving in that direction. If you look at history, the NCAA tournament started off with less than half the field that it has now, and the NIT actually used to be a big deal. Now the NIT rewards the 69th best team in the country. Back in the day, it actually used to mean something when the NCAA tournament was a lot smaller, and naturally over time, there's been more expansion, extra rounds added, and now it's up to 68 teams. So it's natural that we're going to see that same progression for college football where they start off with 2. In 1998, it took how long? 50 years of us missing out on great matchups, Washington, Miami, other teams that didn't get to play because of bowl tie-ins. And finally, in 98, they did it. And now it took until, 2014 or so before they finally expand. I think it's moving that direction. It's probably just going to take time because college football is slower to evolve. But the big reason is, if they can make more money off of it, if the BCS finds a way to somehow make more money, they're going to expand the playoffs. They're going to make it bigger because it's going to make them richer.
Yeah, I guess that's the part that I look at the cash printing machine that is the NFL at this point, and you look at the numbers between what an NFL TV deal looks like and what some of the college TV deals look like, and that spread's closing. But people love their football, and I feel it's hard to sometimes feel like the NCAA isn't squeezing all the dollars out of it they can. Do you think that's more like inept NCAA leadership? Is that the weird kind of Game of Thrones thing that is the different conferences that each have their own, in some cases, rather large chunk of power? Is it the, lovely trips that the bowl commissioners lavish conference leads with and ways they kind of, bribe their way in? Like, who's really to blame for the NCAA not squeezing more money out of this thing ultimately?
Maybe it's really hard to keep track of this when you're spending all day long swimming around in your money bin, But, why does the NFL keep talking about going to an 18-game schedule? Because it's not only it's more money, but there's also demand. The demand, the people's appetite for this stuff is insatiable. So, for them to, the fact that they haven't seen that, well, we can just restructure, the end game, bowl program so that, we can make, the final 2 or 3 weekends worth so much more. And like you said, ratings have been down. Ratings will go back up 37% as soon as they go to something like that. But honestly, it's just like the sooner it behooves them to do it as soon as possible. There's no reason why they shouldn't at this point.
And I think the money machine concept sort of translates or manifests itself in the saturation issue with all the bowl games. And that doesn't seem to be a solution, or doesn't seem to have a solution with playoffs. So, really, the reality of the situation is that we're faced with watching a game that is more or less meaningless, but it has a fancy name, and that's going to be a continuation going forward for, I don't know, the unforeseen future as far as I'm concerned.
As far as money in the NCAA, we already see college football as the second biggest sport in America in terms of money. It might be the biggest in terms of, sheer volume of humanity who care about it. Maybe if you take out fantasy football, maybe the NFL drops down a peg. But it's not the NCAA that was holding it back. The NCAA has had very little to do with college football beyond enforcing rules for a long time now. They really are not in charge of the postseason. It really is ESPN and the power conferences. The NCAA, they run the tournaments for every other sport, but there really was no bad guy entity holding back the playoff. You could sort of point to the Big Ten and their clutching onto the Rose Bowl tradition if you wanted to finger a bad guy. But, I don't think we really have to. As far as, the future of that and where that goes, with the lid taken off the money machine, the playoff, they're looking at it's going to bring in, $500 million TV deal a year, $345 million, per year, something like that, going to conferences. The majority of that to power conferences, a lot to the lower tier guys. You break the math down, 25% of the $345 million to the Mountain West Conference USA, the MAC, the Sun Belt, that lower tier group. We're looking at schools that are just starting up football that are going to be getting $2 or $3 million a year from the playoff that they might not play in for 50 years. Georgia State in their third year of football is going to get, $3 million in playoff money if all the numbers line up. The Charlotte 49ers are starting up football and will instantly get playoff money. You know, coaching salaries are going to go up. We're going to get to a point where amateurism, you know, we can't pay players. Well, you got a lot of money. You kind of have to pay players at some point. You know, the playoff is it's a can of worms and it's a hornet's nest, and it could change everything. You know, at the NCAA, as it is right now, they're sort of the shadowy thing that, you know, we're in charge, but all you are is a rule book as far as football is concerned. In the future, you know, we could see the power conferences break away from the NCAA. We're going to start our own rule book. There's been chatter about that for a long time now. Even John Calipari, Kentucky basketball coach, has brought that up explicitly. He said take the top 64 power schools and they can start up their own thing. You know, that could happen, you know, and then they can pay players whatever they want. You know, they could pay Cam Newton $1 million a year and it wouldn't matter. Who would stop them? You know, it's not illegal. But, you know, the playoff could really change, you know, far more than just crowning a champion.
All right, well, I think we've got about 10 minutes left, so I probably have one more question, but I wanted, if anybody else has questions, okay, just kind of perfect. So, so I guess I actually don't really, you know, just kind of, that was a very perfect wrap up of just how big I think that the change that lies ahead could theoretically be, and I know we're all excited to kind of see that play out. Yeah, I guess with that, I'm just going to throw it open to the audience for questions, and then we can wrap up. Yeah, right there.
With the additional games and two former college players especially, what is the line of demarcation where even the NCAA can't possibly justify not paying players at least some sort of postseason?
Just to repeat the question for those watching on the live stream, the question was about how does the NCAA continue to justify not paying players as... Yeah, so is change coming as far as players getting paid as these postseason royalties flood in? Anybody up here?
I think it just my gut instinct says that it amounts to equality over all the sports within the schools, even the ones that aren't making money. If you pay one sport, you essentially have to pay all sports, and that can get kind of hefty. That's the only thing that I would see as the biggest deterrent from that ever happening.
Like you said, it would be nice to see that happening, especially with the expansion. I mean, say the playoffs expand and they cut the regular season, you got like a whatever playoff system. It would be nice to see guys just get an increased stipend. You know, everybody gets a stipend. It'd be nice to see, and it'd be kind of based on the city you live in. Like a guy in Los Angeles and a guy in Arizona shouldn't get the same amount of stipend. I think, you know, it should adjust it accordingly so guys can live and they can take their girlfriends on dates, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, because I was living in one of the most expensive cities in the world, and I had to do it on $1,000 a month. Most of that went to rent, and the rest, you know, you just kind of scrape by. So I definitely agree with an increase in the stipend for sure.
Over here, Sid.
So with the basketball tournament, there's 64. Where there were 64 teams, Dick Vitale complained about the 65th, and now that 68 complained about the 69th. So talking about 4 teams, right, for college football playoff. What's the best system to identify those 4 teams? All of a sudden, all you have to put out the 5th team, and does an undefeated team automatically deserve an invitation?
So, yeah, again, to repeat for those at home, question was just about, you know, we struggle to find, we have bubble teams when there's 64 slots. How are we going to use, what system are we going to use to get the right 4 into this postseason?
Yeah, I mean, kind of the brilliance of it is we think, oh, this will do away with, you know, this will do away with drama and controversy. No. It's going to ramp up because now we're not talking about who's the 3rd best team. We're talking about this cluster. Like this year, there was probably 5 SEC teams that could have made the claim to be the number 4 team in the country. You know, and as far as who's going to choose, right now it looks like a selection committee, not composed of old coaches, which there's a lot of old coaches lobbying for that when it came out. You know, every retired coach would like the honor. But it looks like it's going to be representatives from conferences like it is with the NCAA basketball tournament, which that seems to be the fairest as long as it's, transparent as it can reasonably be.
With regards to an undefeated team, I think if you have a system where an undefeated team does not somehow make it into your top 8 or God forbid, top 4, I feel like you have a system that is irrevocably broken. So I feel like then the issues would go so much farther beyond whether or not we give an undefeated team an automatic bid. But, I mean, you don't want to be that 5th team and you don't want to be the 9th team. But I feel like in terms of debates, I just feel like.
But isn't that some of what makes college football so great? Like that you don't want to do away with is that every game matters to an extent where like I can't afford a loss even though it's early. I can't risk falling to 5.
I feel like when we start saying things like, isn't that what makes college football so great, we start falling back into those like old like pro BCS arguments, and I feel like it's our time warp into like how we got into this mess in the first place. So I feel like, nostalgia has its place, but I feel like sort of the less that we think of it and we phrase it in those terms, I feel like the healthier the sport will be long term.
There does have to be a best of both worlds kind of thing. I mean, an undefeated season, that is precious. That is something that should always mean something. Even Ohio State, they're on, the NCAA sanctions, I don't care. That should always be a very special thing. And it's something that means more in college football than I think it does in any other sport. In the NFL, it was this oddity, this curiosity, and it was a big story. But in college football, it's, for so long, that's been the key to a championship is going unbeaten. And I think we have to do everything we can to hang on to that. Even as we progress and as we change.
And if you play 12 regular season games, I really can't see that taking away from its value. It's just such a small sample size. It's going to have value regardless of a playoff system or not.
Up in front there.
Do you guys think that what happened this year with like the ratings going down and the attendance and then the debacle of a title game, do you think that'll speed this process up at all? And is there a timeline that you guys can foresee?
Question was just, does the ratings and the attendance and all of the drops and then a not great national championship game lead to accelerate any of the changes that we're talking about up here?
Yeah, that could, accelerate some of the lower tier bowl changes. The playoff stuff is on course for 2014. You could make the case that the Alabama versus Oklahoma State getting into the title game to play LSU 2 years ago, you can make the case that sped up the playoff process. But the playoff is coming. The money truck is backing up, and there's nothing anybody can do to stop it. It is a good question. If the lower tier bowls keep losing ratings, they're gonna have to do something. They're gonna have to break up the matchups a little bit, clear up some of the roughage, get some of the 6-6 teams out of there. Try a few of those things. Maybe move some destinations around. Maybe kill some of the Beef O'Brady's of the world.
One of the problems is ESPN is televising most of these lower tier bowl games. They're making money, and the reason why they're trying to put on as many bowl games as they can is because they sell the commercials. They're making money off of every single one of these games. They get sponsors. Obviously, the sponsors are happy to sponsor it, so they're happy. Who's losing out in this whole thing? And that's the big question. And to me, looking at some of the numbers, it's the schools that are. They're the ones that are getting stuck buying whatever tickets they don't sell. If their ticket allotment is 10,000 and it's a bad bowl game because they have a 6-6 team, only 1,000 fans buy it, the school is footing the bill. So to me, in order to get rid of that, the only group that can really make a change would be the schools and say, we're not going to send a team because it's a losing deal for us. And that's what it comes down to. I think that's the only group that's powerful to stop that process. Otherwise, ESPN wants to put on as many as they can because they're making money off of it. The schools are the ones that are losing. I think they're the only ones that can really put a stop to it somehow.
And because those deals get negotiated on multi-year basis, it's like 1 year may be down, but by the time the next time the deal comes up, they can point to a couple years that were good, help justify keeping the money machine flowing.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think you're going to see too many schools, taking that principled stand. They're just going to eat the losses. It's unjust that, excuse me, that schools would lose money on a postseason game that generates money for someone else, and get stuck with tickets that they can't sell. But coaches need the bowl practices. If you don't take those 15 bowl practices, you're basically leaving a mini camp off the table. Your team is falling behind already, for next season. There's that. It looks bad. There's the branding thing. You want your team to be, the one team on national TV at any one point. I don't think we're going to see too many schools turning down bowl bids. Notre Dame did a few years ago, but they're Notre Dame. They're weird. It's going to be somebody bigger than just schools. The conferences themselves are going to have to do something there.
I guess we have one last question, and then we'll wrap. the question was about how we break the SEC stranglehold on and current kind of tilt of power in college football.
I think the preseason deal will be hard to break due to the fact that coaches get bonuses based on we're preseason #1 team, et cetera. But yeah, it'd be nice to break the SEC stranglehold. I mean, there's an East Coast bias, so obviously, a lot of people they get all the press and all the love, and then teams on the West Coast that people don't get to see throughout the week. They don't get as much love until the end of the year, and it's they lose a game and it's too late. It would be nice to see that break up a little bit, but obviously I don't see that happening in the preseason deals happening. It'd be nice to see, like the BCS comes out week 5 or something like that. It'd be nice to see all the polls come out week 5, but there's too many incentives for college programs to be preseason #1 and preseason top 25, et cetera. So.
All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for us. If you have questions, I'm sure the panelists will be around. You guys can maybe catch them afterwards. But for now, let's just take a second and thank all 5 of our panelists going down the line: Keith, Jason, Erik, Ryan, and Larry. And thank you all for listening.